Hello everyone, welcome to our panel discussion today about crisis and health tech. What challenges should we prepare for during the Ukrainian crisis? We have a fantastic group of speakers today, but before introducing them, please remember to mute the microphones. You will be able to ask questions at the end of the discussion, and you can also use the Slack channel to leave your questions, comments, and additional viewpoints for the community to discuss in the meantime. So just feel free to share your thoughts or questions anytime. My name is Balint Bene, CEO of Bene Studio, and I will be the moderator today. My company does health tech mobile and web application development and design. Our goal with our work is to help product companies solve their technological challenges. Our panelists today are Beracah Stortvedt, practice co-leader Marsh McLennan Agency, and Melissa Toney, Head of Regulatory and Licensing, GLO. First, I would like to briefly introduce yourself, our fantastic panelists. Who are you and how do you contribute to the health tech ecosystem? Melissa, could you kick off?
Of course. Hi everyone. Like Balint explained, my name is Melissa and I am a solicitor and I'm based here in the UK. I head up the regulatory and licensing team that are operating from GL Law. My team work really closely with the corporate commercial team as well as the litigation team within our practice. And what we do is we assist healthcare regulators, healthcare operators, startups, SMEs who are looking to put their products on the market, and we help them meet compliance and regulatory laws within the UK. Previously, we did a lot of work with, of course, European regulatory law, but of course, having broken away, we do a combination of that. So we do the transfer of placing goods on the market, both in the UK and Europe, as well as importation of such goods into the UK and onto our market.
Thanks, Melissa. And Beracah, could you introduce yourself and how do you contribute to the ecosystem?
Yeah, I'm Beracah Stortvedt. I co-founded and lead the digital health and emerging medtech practice at Marsh McLennan Agency. So I help digital health companies from startup through IPO and beyond in assessing risk, understanding that risk, and then placing insurance coverage that is going to help mitigate that risk in a scalable fashion that's affordable for companies as they grow. And I just love being a connector and partner in this ecosystem with people like Bene Studio as well.
Yeah, thanks, Beracah. And let's jump into our topics. First, we would like to discuss about the potential changes in the economy regarding the actual crisis. And I would like to ask you, how is this situation affects the stock exchange markets, startup investments, valuations in health tech? Beracah, would you mind to start with your approach?
Yeah, many of our public clients have seen, and some of this was even before had started before the Ukrainian crisis, but global markets have been down to start the year, substantially affecting valuations of public companies substantially, right? Stock prices are down 20% plus in the marketplace. And then we've seen a little bit of slowing in the venture capital world as well. Before in 2021, things were going gangbusters in terms of huge amounts of investment and kind of almost well above what the market should normally dictate for valuations, and therefore a lot of money flowing into health tech startups. And we're starting to see a bit more disciplined approach in the marketplace. And I think the kind of global impact of the Ukrainian crisis is really contributing to continuing that trend based on what was already going on at the start of the year, and is going to continue, I think, throughout 2022 as long as the conflict continues, to have a bit of a dampening effect on the dollars available for venture capital investment, as well as continued effect on the stock exchanges around the world.
Yeah, so basically, a lot of things are depending on whether the war is continuing or will be better, this situation. And Melissa, how can you see this situation regarding the startups, valuations?
Yeah, no, it was really shocking, actually. A few weeks ago, I picked up a newspaper and there was this fantastic headline on The Guardian saying, "Worse the effect of Ukraine war causing a catastrophe for global economy as stock markets plunge." And, you know, your heart just sinks when you read that, because, of course, if you think about it, just as Beracah said, you know, we were coming out of a pandemic and people were just about getting confidence again. And so for me, I had seen a drastic shift in investors, SMEs, startups, you know, making the right sort of inquiries, having the confidence to start the work and promote things as they gave themselves projections for the next, whether it be, you know, short-term kind of projections that they gave themselves for 5 years, and there was some sort of traction taking place, but of course we then had this massive plunge, and I think it's being felt globally. The immediate response, I think, is, you know, this incitement of fear with the markets plunging across Europe. That wasn't particularly helpful. In addition to the FTSE 100 and stuff like the French stock markets, you know, recording records lows, it feels obvious to kind of speak from a place where there's a real nervousness amongst investors right now. And I think they're approaching things with caution. And I think you're right, Balint. It really does depend on how long this traction continues between the hostility between Russia and Ukraine, because whilst medical devices themselves, you know, remain very attractive for companies worldwide, one of the largest kind of distributors are based in Central and Eastern Europe. You know, this despite Russia's continued attempt to kind of, you know, robustly kind of get around and you know, this kind of bullish behavior in conforming the output and input that the countries can actually work with. This hostile invasion essentially is put a real public fear, I think, in investments and the facilities and the ability to kind of progress this kind of devices and health tech generally across the sector.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Melissa, you highlighted the importance of devices within the health tech ecosystem and specifically in this situation. And I'm really curious how you see it, whether the flexible startups can solve this challenge easier, or the big companies with more resources.
Yeah, so I think that's been the approach. I mean, a lot of my kind of startups that I'm having conversations with, they're not necessarily completely running out of resources immediately, because most of them will have, you know, some in reserve, not very much. But of course, as you can imagine, a larger company would have far more in reserve. And so their ability to kind of ride out the storm is easier for them than it would be for a startup or very much smaller SME. But it's also about being really resourceful, being adaptable, you know, kind of adjusting your plans, as it were, and appreciating, more importantly, that it may well be that the talent pools that you dipped into for those resources are simply not in the same place anymore. You know, we're seeing a complete migration of a large proportion of Europe into the rest of Europe. And that's going to dramatically affect, you know, any sort of supply chain that we have to then counter and deal with as things kind of patter off later on.
Mm-hmm. So we don't just have to calculate with the supply chain issues regarding the hardwares, but the labor market change is also a really important aspect nowadays. And Beracah, how can you see this situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree. It's a challenging situation for a startup to be in this type of market. I think, you know, larger companies do have advantages and things that they can access to be able to weather things more effectively. But I think there's also an innovative advantage too. If you have the skill and you have the talent to be able to do something, right? I think if you can continue to build that and deal with the current capital that you have over the next few months, as long as things don't drag out too long, you know, there is even higher demand for virtual or digital products and services. So I think there's a silver lining here in that, you know, I think being able to provide a digital health product in an environment where supply chain issues and physical products are tougher and tougher to move around and to launch into the marketplace, having a digital product is a distinct advantage in this current environment. And so I think there is some benefit there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you see that although on one hand there are more and more problems with the physical assets, on the other side more and more need and demand for the virtual solutions. And how can the health tech market change into this direction? So can it be a sustainable direction? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think. Yeah, I mean, I think you know, focusing on digital solutions and being able to just build networks and relationships to try and find those customers effectively, you know, that's going to be the key thing, right? With any startup, the go-to-market strategy and being able to have a good product, but also being able to access the right people in a virtual manner to be able to get your product into the market is really important. And I think the companies that are able to build those networks and relationships and be able to sell virtually and create digital products are the ones that are really going to thrive in this environment. And I think the benefit of being a startup versus an established org is you're just more nimble, right? So you can be able to adjust to changing environments quickly, adjust your sales model, adjust your product delivery model to be able to meet changing needs in the marketplace due to, you know, the issues that are going on in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with that. I think one of the strongest takeaways that we would have is that, you know, there's significant changes, isn't it? And in response to kind of the new environment for recruiting, developing, and kind of like Beracah said, regaining that talent and bringing it through. I think it's been a real harsh reality check for the rest of the world, and kind of seeing how this fundamental shift for businesses is kind of, you know, went from a place of concentration to a point of, you know, kind of for companies to deliberately show their flexibility on geography, on compensation, on their ability to, you know, have competition, talents, you know, no longer traditional placement is in place. We'd already started to shift pre-post pandemic, and now we find ourselves, you know, even more kind of heavily kind of perpetuated straight into the situation. But of course, the resilience I think that the startups can show compared to probably larger companies, or in addition to that, the fact that they're slightly more adventurous maybe because they're keen, you know, to see what the next step will bring, or the next kind of stage of how they adapt themselves, what that's going to look like. I think, yeah, we have every confidence that startups will still come through, I think, and they would probably be best set in probably kind of rebouncing and kind of recalibrating themselves from the situation.
Mm-hmm. And as we discussed that the virtual side, the online side, could be a growing potential for smaller and bigger health tech companies as well. How to become independent from hardwares and devices in an industry where measurement and sensors are so important?
I'm sorry, can you better explain that question a little bit? Sorry.
Yeah, so how to handle that situations that the physical devices are more difficult to access for startups and enterprises, and for the end customer as well, and how can health tech services provide good quality solutions still.
Brock, were you going to speak? Sorry, you want to go for it?
Yeah, it's okay. I think, well, I think that's where innovation comes into play, right? Like, where are there situations where something other than a physical device could be replaced with an AI-driven solution, for instance, or how can you, making sure that you can find creative supply chain solutions when you do need hardware, right? And how can I locally source in a way that is sustainable, right? The problem is with a global economy, a lot of times, we're working with third-party manufacturers in Asia or somewhere else, right? And the supply chain issues are exacerbated when you're taking a multinational approach. And so, how can you think differently and creatively, both in digitizing things that may have required a device previously, as well as looking at supply chain options that are more stable in an unstable global environment.
So basically, this stability will be a higher priority than before, and it may affect the prices on the other hand. Melissa, what's your experience with it? The pricing side of the consumer solutions in HealthTech?
I think it's very much a risk-averse kind of risk mitigation approach. Financial impact, I think, from the war is not probably immediately felt in HealthTech in the same way, maybe as it's felt in other areas currently. There's increasing raw material prices and inflation, that's affecting general consumer prices across, globally across the world. But of course, it really depends on how proactive I think each company's planning efforts were, and what kind of resources they've had in place, and how long they may be able to sustain their current supply chain without having to increase their prices because of new and incoming raw materials, etc. I've had a lot of clients who say, look, we're okay for a few months. We can sit on our current resources and continue to go into production, etc., and take matters through. But of course, if this is sustained for for the next 6-9 months, as it were, then of course they find themselves in difficulties, and it's inevitable, I think, that those sorts of filtering down of inflation and effects will make its way to the consumer store, and prices will go up in things as price of living is increased across the world. And so it may well be it's just a matter of time, but immediately I think we're able to possibly sustain things and be quite responsible as to how things are managed right now.
I see. So pretty soon there can be a situation when digital healthcare prices are rising as well. And what can it cause in terms of sales and growth opportunities, higher prices?
Well, stuff like competition becomes an issue, doesn't it? And taking things to the market, and kind of what that means for the consumer directly, because the consumer may then have to prioritize their need for devices as opposed to wants. And so the reasons that would normally normally have a robust medical technology industry that's for which the competition is relatively manageable. We may see that being completely displaced in a few months' time, and it may well be that instead the influx of changes that we're going to have to see take place because of things like mass migration, be it the change in supply chains, the flexibility of businesses, all of those things are counter effects which we will feel later on, unfortunately. But it's about our ability to sustain that. How do we counter that? I guess this really depends on how the rest of the market sits, and as and when things begin to level off. But I think it will definitely be a case of making the right choices, potentially about things that are probably needed in the immediacy as opposed to probably wanted.
And can we expect a pricing war, like some companies keep their prices low, just to keep that consumer base and to win over other companies who are in a situation to raise their prices?
I mean, it's not impossible. It's always on the cards, and I think the larger, more established companies can probably enter into those kind of pricing wars and be more competitive. And of course, that will be quite detrimental for startups that are coming through, because they may not be able to, produce at mass in that way and still make a profit and make the business, be worth their investment. But of course, we're talking about HealthTech, we're talking about Medicare as well, and so it really depends on who the end customer is as well. Because if the customer is a hospital or a private medical institution, then it may not be that they themselves are in such a position to compete with the higher prices. And so if a price war does erupt and the bigger companies bring that forward, then yeah, there's a real chance where things like startups will suffer the most. And most unfortunate, obviously, because there's some brilliant, really innovative companies that are coming through, and it'll be such a shame that they find themselves priced out of the competition because of the situation that's out of their control.
Yes, definitely. And Beracah, how can you see this pricing issue?
I think I tend to be a glass half full kind of person, even though I'm a looking at risk. But I think anytime you're bringing that's the beauty of being in health tech and emerging med tech, right? Is a lot of times you're bringing an innovative solution that a big company can't offer or can't bring to market as quickly. And so you're not in a position where there's a ton of competition in many senses. And so you can avoid some of that price war issue if you're bringing a unique and innovative solution to market that a big global company doesn't have. And big global companies are not as good at innovating. So I think there is some insulation from that, depending upon what market you're in and what your product is, right? So if you're bringing a medical device to the market that a global company is also bringing to market, that's going to be really tough, right? And that's where you're really going to feel that pricing or squeeze potentially. But if you're bringing an AI-driven solution to market that no one else has and no one else can do, then there's a different sense of pricing insulation. The challenge, I think, then becomes just if there's fewer funds available to invest in innovation, are the number of customers and your ability to grow the business, is that going to be impacted? I feel like that's more of the concern from my perspective than competition in this environment.
So with innovation and with niche markets, there could be solutions to avoid this direct pricing competition and focusing more on the value generation for the customers.
Yeah,
and
I think so.
In addition to the pricing issues, we can hear more and more about the cyber attacks, especially during the war. It's a new way of attacking the other countries, and it may affect other industries as well. What can you see in your client base and on the HealthTech market, how these cyber attacks can affect the products themselves?
That's a big thing in my world right now. Right now, the global cyber market is in shambles. Is to put it lightly. Even before the crisis, right? We were looking at clients on average doubling their price of their cyber coverage with the same exposure base year over year. And in different parts of the world, it can even be worse than that. So where there's limited market competition. So it's very challenging. We have seen, especially early in the conflict, Russian actors increasing attacks on Western companies and corporations, from small to large, mostly focused on medium to large size organizations, but even some SMEs being impacted by that. Initially, we've seen that cool down a little bit, just because of resource drag, honestly, on their end and everything that's going into the conflict itself. So we have seen that decrease, and I think some of the cyber criminals actually and criminal groups having been in the Ukraine previously, we've seen a downward trend in some of those attacks. So, I think in general, there has been a bit of an uptick from a cyber attack perspective, but it's moderating. And I think in general, we've just seen a proliferation of ransomware and other services that have happened over the last 2 years that are unrelated to the conflict, that's really driving the issues in the marketplace right now, where SMEs are being expected to have cyber controls in place that are much more sophisticated than they were a year ago. You may not even get coverage in the market if you don't have a set of 5 to 10 controls in place. And if you do, it's going to be 3 to 4 times the cost of a company that has those things in place. And so we're working with our clients a lot to say, hey, it's going to be much less expensive for you to just implement these 3 or 4 things than it is to try and find insurance without them.
I think that's right. I think for sort of kind of conversations I'm having with clients are very much, you need to be risk adverse. You need to be, mitigating these things before they come around. Cyber attacks and health tech kind of go hand in hand, isn't it? And it's really about mitigating that situation before it comes out of control. And I think one of the things we can probably take away from this is, lessons learned have taught us that, if cyber attacks kind of attack healthcare and health tech, then we kind of have no idea of what the fallout's going to be, and the repercussions of that is likely to be far wider than we expect. And so if you think about how much sense it makes to be risk adverse as opposed to cost averse later on, then it's a no-brainer, really. So the kind of conversations is about having these things lined up. I mean, I think they're acutely aware. One of the things that's been really proactive over here since ransomware was back in 2017 and the NHS was completely wiped out in the UK. I think whenever I'm having conversations with clients, that's the first thing they bring up. They're just really acutely aware of that being a possibility and what they need to have in place to give themselves the protection and the support they need. Nobody wants another attack like WannaCry, where everything goes down and they lose so much information and information is passed on to the wrong people. So I completely agree with you there, Beracah. It really is about kind of mitigating that risk and taking those steps. And I think most startups that I'm working with and SMEs are very much in that place where that isn't a question of cost, that they kind of factor that in. They appreciate how that better supports the business later on, and they're happy to take that kind of step.
So
I think a lot of it's just
go ahead, Beracah.
Right. I think a lot of it's just education, right? Like health tech founders a lot of times don't know what they're missing and don't know what they need to do, the willingness to do it. But I think really understanding, without the internal resources necessarily of a developed IT security team, what do I actually need to do? I'm willing to do it, but what do I need to do? And how do I need to protect myself to set up my business for scalability later on?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right.
And if we summarize all of these changes in the economy and security, how may it affect the entire business models and the whole industry in the health technology? What do you think?
I think Beracah just said it. I think it's about being strategic, isn't it, in the beginning, and getting that support on board. I think there's going to be a real significant change in our response to this kind of new environment that's going to be developing. Europe is very different than what it was a few months ago. Developing, gaining talent, having access to people, security, defense, all of those are very different fundamental shifts that any kind of business, not just health tech business, I think will have to adapt themselves to. I think we got a real harsh reality check about security and how supply chains and the dynamics of geography and those sorts of things, how they all intertwine with each other very quickly, and in fact how flexible and adaptable we can be. I mean, like I said, it all started, I think, with pandemic and the flexibility approach, but it's really kind of recognizing that traditional marketplace has shifted, I think, and the competition for that new talent, the competition for how you strategize your business going forward is really about that kind of adaptability that you have to have. And I don't think we need to stay in a place where we're going to be in too much panic either. There's some really brilliant people in the world who, think outside of the box. So I think this will just be a little hurdle where they've got to recollect themselves, recalibrate, and rethink how they're going to bring their businesses to the forefront. And innovation is key, initiative is key, and resilience, I think.
So flexibility, adaptability is the solution to handle these rapidly changing effects.
Yeah, I think so.
And then where are the opportunities, right? Like where does this situation create new opportunities, right? For innovation, for a different approach, for business model, and then how can companies look at that and look for the opportunities, not look for, oh my goodness, the things that are negative, but how can I, there may be a new talent pool that might be that's available with the refugee issues, right? That there may be different things that can be done or utilized to your benefit and advantage as a company in terms of digitizing businesses and being more flexible and adaptable, that can be taken advantage of. And I think that's my encouragement or thought in this is, some of the best companies in the world thrive or grow in challenging times because the leadership of those organizations sees what can be done and innovates quickly and can take advantage of that. And others are gonna miss it and fail. And I think looking for those opportunities and taking them both from a talent basis, from a digitization basis, from a different go-to-market strategy perspective, can be taken advantage of and be a real positive for HealthTech.
Yeah. And I know we haven't touched on this very much, but can I just say that this kind of refugee migration is very different than what we've probably ever seen before. We've had governments kind of rallying together in a really demonstrating a really different, united approach. And we speak about it as a refugee kind of movement, but I kind of like to think about it as that, utilization and movement of skills and experiences that they're coming into it with. And, we have situations where governments are waiving visa requirements, they're producing and providing instant access to labor and education. So we're not probably going to have a massive lag as probably what we've seen in other situations when, we've had similar refugees moving across continents, as it were. So I think the bounce back is probably going to be a lot quicker, I'm hoping, for all parties involved than possibly, where we're sat now looking at it. There's some really great companies already reaching out to people who are based in countries where they can pick up work straight away. So yeah, it really is about kind of looking for opportunities, like you'd said.
So the challenging situations can cause new opportunities as well, and it can be a direction for startups, for bigger enterprises as well, and the flexible companies, they can find the ways to the newest balance and the survival. So yeah, we really hope that these new directions can lead to an even better quality healthcare and health technology ecosystem. And now let's open up the floor for the questions. So feel free to raise your hands and unmute yourself and I will call out you for the questions or comments. Okay, Arpad?
Yeah, well, I wanted to reflect on something that Beracah mentioned, that kind of the investments and the funding going into the health tech space is slowing down. I'm wondering if you guys see any kind of direct connection to the Ukrainian situation. How does that affect the investment, if it does in any way?
I think there must be a connection, isn't there? I think we'd be naive not to think there is, because there is currently there. I think there's a distribution of lack of kind of confidence right now. You know, people are cautious. People are watching and waiting to see what's happening. You know, kind of what the bounce back effect is. And so coming with that, I think we'll probably have a large proportion of, you know, where do I want to put my money? Where do I want to kind of, you know, what's the next big thing? And it all depends on, like, I think the point we've been making is the innovation and you know, the ability to be flexible and changing to demand. And, you know, it's where that rests. I think we will then see a bit more traction taking up, but I don't think it's completely lost. I think, you know, there is markets which people still have, you know, some faith in, and that will continue if the resources are in place and, you know, the opportunities there. But yeah, I think it's a bit of both, is my view.
Yeah, thanks, Melissa. And now it's time for the next session. So thank you very much, Melissa and Beracah, for this fantastic discussion. I believe that it helped for everybody to see the situation on a more balanced and complex way. And now let's move to our speed networking session to learn more about each other.